Welcome to our very last speaker series of this year. And we are honored to have our very own Siinqee sister, Eliana Barrios Suarez. And her presentation is entitled Addressing Violence with Solidarity and Courage, Learning from the
Yeah.
Experience of the Indigenous Women in Ayacucho, Peru.
Ayacucho.
Ayacucho.
I know that it's difficult.
Thank you
Ayacucho.
thanks for that. So yeah, we'll bring it to Ariana for this, and then let's welcome her. So go ahead, Ariana.
Thank you so much for having me here. And it's such an honor to be part of the learning series. I believe I try my best to be in all of them, and they were amazing presentations. So I feel pretty humble with my own. I know that it's extensive, but we go until it's necessary, and that's it. Yes, I put a little bit more context to the original title because I like to precise, what woman's knowledge we are referring to and how is exactly what is there. And basically, this presentation will be about a research journey. How I start with so many questions, how these questions have to be kind of, if I can say, endorsed by the community, and that leads you to changes, more questions, more answers. I never stop. You start doing research, and it's a non-stop situation. So this is a quick outline of the next, I guess, hopefully 45 minutes, no more than that. And I will start with a land acknowledgement using our own Siinqee land acknowledgement. And then a little bit of how this research journey started, what questions on violence, resilience, trauma started, then how the honoring Quechua women's responses to violence was the central piece of this research journey, and what other questions getting from there, what other answers. As most people know, I am a research geek. So this is something that I enjoy always presenting, delivering, and thinking, and kind of conceptualizing and moving on research. So we'll start with our land acknowledgement. We and the Siinqee Institute offer deep gratitude and respect to the indigenous stewards of this land in which we live, learn, and work. As migrants and refugees who settled and incorporated the Siinqee Institute in the settler colonial state of Canada, we give deep acknowledgement that this land is the traditional territory of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Honoring the calls to action by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, we commit to learning and spreading the knowledge of Indigenous people struggles on this land. We strive to forge respectful relations with the people and the land that nurture us. I believe that acknowledgements continue in our official acknowledgement, but I put it there because I like to make the connection that actually my research has been also honoring the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Peru. And with this incredible, courageous, and wise woman, they were the most amazing people participating and giving their testimonies. So the connection is deep on that way. So I will tell you what was my initial research questions. As a community mental health practitioner, social worker, former economist, PhD students, I was looking at variations in violence. What is the impact of direct, structural, epistemic violence, but in particular, really focus on sexual violence and political violence because they are very persistent and very damaging, and it seems like they are unstoppable. Sexual violence is what for me very kind of a focus. Why sexual violence is such a persistent threat to human rights and public health. We have 100 years of feminism, and it's some gains and progress, but unfortunately not really in the way that is actually making a real change. Then the variations in trauma. As a mental health worker, as a trauma counselor, and that, I was having so many doubts that the Western trauma framework applies everywhere. And that really is it's a way to conceptualize distress and suffering, but not necessarily mean the same, not even everywhere, but even here for different people. And the variations of resilience. It is resilience or is resistance. Are you just surviving adversity, or you are trying to chase that adversity? So that's the two kind of questions. And how is conceptualized resilience in the global South? So that was kind of my large, huge, and incredible, difficult to answer questions, but you start with something. And something that helped me, I am done having the incredible theoretical eloquence of my colleagues, Marta, Chizuru, and Anne, that they are so incredible versed in theory. I am more a quantitative researcher, but I look for theory to really clarify. And one that helped me to see how difficult these questions were was Bordeaux, a philosopher, the symbolic violence conceptualizing. In a famous publication, The Weight of the War, Bordeaux called these locations the difficult spots, difficult to describe and think about it. And I can say all these questions are very difficult to describe and think about it. And nothing will be having a simple one-side answer. It has to be something that represents how he described a multi-layer representation that articulate all these realities that sometimes are not possible even to put it together. But in a certain way, you just have to recognize that they exist. And that they are difficult to answer. So that was a key piece. When I got to this specific thing, my whole headache of how to articulate things in my PhD was solved. I said, I am safe. This guy is so brilliant, and he's saying the same like me. So I feeling supported and definitely there. Then I will go for another part that was difficult for me when I decided that my research will be actually in Peru, because it is when you are an outsider of the community, you really have a lot of ethical challenges. Being a diaspora make you part of the community and still an outsider. But for me, the ethical challenges were even worse because you have to be even more careful. It's your own people, but you are not part of that. And so it was, you have no idea. I was feeling all my time that I was asking permission constantly in my next step because it was part of my ethical responsibility, my own personal responsibility. I was completely, how can I say, aware of my northern privilege. I am a Canadian resident. I am a Canadian since I have free mobility. I can go back and forth. Most people can't do that. So that kind of resources and mobility was like hitting me, because it was a huge privilege that I have to be aware. The other thing is that you for more than you endorse decolonizing frameworks and that, you have risk of being practicing neo-colonial actions. Being considered an expert, even willing or reluctantly, it just have that risk of kind of neo-colonial experiences in your research, in your relationships with your communities. It's another risk to the value and expertise of Southern communities. And that was something that really was pissing me off, to be honest, that we were looking to the global north for solutions when you see Southern communities, they have way more challenges and they actually solve those challenges. So I am so happy that in global health, at least, global health is doing a turn of that. It's kind of, how they did COVID there, how they did, they have less resources and they did better. So that's the kind of solutions. So, but it is a huge reach to do this devaluing this expertise. And one of the things that can be connected with the Siinqee Institute value is exactly that, that we value that expertise. We value that knowledge. And that is the central piece of what the Institute is about it. There is a risk of charity work. Charity doesn't really solve things. It's a band-aid solution. It's helpful. Sometimes it's necessary, but it's not part of the solution in many ways. The other thing that my colleague and the Indigenous sister, Cindy Blastock, she's totally focused is the appropriation of knowledge that happens so much, has happened in all the history of the colonization in the Americas and the colonization everywhere. So how this knowledge is appropriated without acknowledgement. You can respect and you can actually value that knowledge, but you have to acknowledge that exists and where it's coming from. So that appropriation of knowledge is so important. And the other is the risk of this rescue approach rather than learning or unlearning. Sometimes it's unlearning more than learning. And that is an effort to our kind of humility and thing, you know what I mean? It just make more effort to unlearn things rather than learn, and offering solidarity. So this was huge ethical challenges that I have in my research as a diaspora, and still I have it because still I am part of research, and that is something that I really want to really comment to you. The other dilemma, and for people who know me, oh, shit, let me just use my fingers are not to trust. I have to use my mouse. It's the dilemma between quantitative and qualitative research. That was a huge dilemma for me. I am a former economist, so I know how structural changes, social changes, all need a quantitative research because you don't know about inequalities. You don't know about kind of, any kind of different thing that happens in socially or economically. You need that. So the dilemma is sometimes, what is the dilemma about? And the research questions and goals of the research definitely impact this decision. For example, if you are looking for the social determinants of health, you need both. You need quantitative side to tell you where are these determinants of health, how inequalities in population, intersectionality. Many feminist scholars and anyone who use intersectionality as a powerful framework to encapsulate, social dimensions and social inequalities. You need that kind of piece, how the structures are different. They create social differences and inequalities. Social work research is committed to social justice, ethical relations, and you need that interrelated realities. And my really wise PhD thesis supervisor, Charmaine Williams, she wrote a paper on community mental health, and we discussed that. And she's the kind of the same. She's in the middle of both kind of research, and she does whatever is the relevance for the research that she is committed in that moment. But she said, in terms of oppression, you need to identify clearly that size of oppression, and then you can go for social change. And that clear identification, you need that, structural kind of perspective, but you need also the narrative and the experiences. So it's very important. I recommend, especially to Divya and Otajbe, this incredible article from Cindy Blastock. Is open access, so you can go there. What she actually have narrate her own experience in how to use quantitative research for creating social change. In this case, was the overrepresentation of Indigenous children in child welfare in Canada. So the title is First Nation Children's Count, an Indigenous Envelope for Quantitative Research. And see, people is aware with her work. She did incredible policy and changes. Her work was with another group of researchers. and allies and people, they were able to actually change a lot of these child welfare unequal benefits for indigenous children and how things were happening now in the present. We are not talking about, the experience of residential school, the child welfare. It's now what was happening. It was still incredible unequal. So my research journey, in simple words, was starting focus on understanding and violence first, and then kind of trying to see if in certain ways you can prevent violence or you can help to minimize, and focus on solidarity with resilience and resistant gender-based movements, and also fostering in community resilience. I believe for violence, at least, you have to look at more than individual kind of piece. You have to look at community work. That is what is happening. I have a preliminary question because, as I mentioned before, I was particularly interested in sexual violence. So as a way to clarify my mind, of course, I clarify with more numbers. So I did a meta-analysis on rape myths. So who are the people who endorse rape myths? Rape myths are the social belief that pass the responsibility to the victims rather than to the perpetrators. And all this in the base of sexual violence against women. So I have to see it really proudly, like this meta-analysis done in 2010 is my proudest achievement, have 700 citations, and still is considered an incredible piece in sexual violence. Incredible. It took me 2 semesters to finish. Like I was working my life out to do all the step of the meta-analysis. You remember Marta Tahani Gadala in the faculty. She was my stats prof, and she's part of that because you have to have 2 coders. So the key findings were really interesting, but I just going to say that one important thing is rape myths, as the sentence of rape myths, that is very associated with sexism. Is associated with all isms. And that is so important because we do a lot of efforts in racism, in against poverty, classism, in sexism, in all these, in homophobia, and in all these different isms. What at the final thing, all there are associated. So I don't know, something is not doing really well in that way because we are just looking at one portion of the picture rather than at the whole picture. And maybe that is something that kind of alleviate that. But this board was really clarifying to me what I was interested in, but I will tell you then what happened after. So then I will talk about 2 important research projects. They were sequential. The first one was surviving the Sasachacu Temple at difficult times, the resilience of Quichua women in the aftermath of the Peruvian armed conflict. And then the second study that was kind of coming there together because you finish a quantitative study with tons of qualitative questions. So I choose the most important one. So how they were actually, what was making this woman, incredible woman, so resilient? What was exactly in their own terms, in their own meaning? So, and that's what's, because they say what is being active politically and all this, that. So I will take you right now directly to Peru. Peru is in the middle of South America. Is before colonization was pretty huge. It was all Bolivia, mostly all Chile, Ecuador, part of Colombia, maybe North, not Brazil, but all of that. After colonization, we become separated in different governments and nations, and that's what is right now. We hadn't changed too much. Colombia and Venezuela used to be also one, and the same Argentina, Uruguay, probably they were just one. But it's, instead of 3 large areas, right now it's like a dozen of different countries. And this is the research site, Ayacucho, that is in the middle of the mountains in Peru. Peru is divided in the middle with the Andes mountains. So Ayacucho is there. It's actually the site of a way more ancient civilization than the Incas, the Wari civilization, that is way more ancient. And this was the last area that the Incas were able to conquer. They are warriors. So very strong people. And this is the findings of the Peruvian Truth and Reconciliation Commission in our Peruvian armed conflict that lasts 20 years. It involves two different groups, the rebel group, the Shining Path, the Sendero Luminoso, and the Peruvian armed forces. The Shining Path was a Maoist-inspired group that the goal was to overthrow the government. And they start kind of moving forward to that. It took 20 years to really make peace for these two groups. But it's a lot of the most of the how can I say, the most of the violence was done in Ayacucho, because starting Ayacucho, the leader of the Sendero Luminoso was not an indigenous person, was a professor in the university. And he really very charismatic professor of philosophy who really engaged many people on this movement. And they start moving towards the capital city, but the most kind of violence was there. At the end, almost 70,000 people were killed or disappeared. 75% of the victims were young indigenous. They were equally responsibility for the killing between the both groups, the Shining Path and the armed forces. But in the case of sexual violence was different. The Sendero Luminoso was only liable for 11% of the reported cases, and the state forces for 85%. So it was a huge difference. 85% of the victims of sexual violence were Quichua-speaking women, and 70% from them were on the province of Ayacucho. So was a lot of there. And I like to you see a visual representation. I took this picture myself. So I am so proud. You see in the top is a fortress. It's not any fortress anymore, but the fence still exists. Now it's kind of museum, forensic site. It's just different activities in that part. But in the times of the conflict, it was a fortress. And what happened is people were being captured, but detained, and many were killed inside of the fortress, and the bodies were thrown to this hill. So, and just in the morning were coming soldiers and people, and there was a lot of mass graves. You see the amount of mass graves, they are a lot. And they were, of course, after the conflict has been right now, even still right now, is a forensic team that is trying to identify everyone there. Still a lot of difficulties on that, but they have been identified. I like you to keep this picture because I will tell you the story of the woman who actually met there looking for their loved ones in the evenings when they know that they were nobody taking care of that. So as the killings were massive, there were also the funerals, lot of collective funerals when they were identified. I don't know if I can do that. Well, just quickly, what the theoretical framework I mentioned already that, quantitative research confirm or disconfirm theory. One of my goals was disconfirm trauma theory. So seeing that is not really applicable everywhere. So that's kind of thing. And it's a lot, it's not just me, it's a lot of even psychiatrists, a lot of people, advocates, human rights, many professions that they really have that view. And in violence, I was looking for structural violence, so how your social position in society make you really target of violence more than others. That this is using health in peace and conflict in different areas, gender-based violence, of course, symbolic violence, that is Bourdieu, that make when the violence can normalize because it become part of the culture, become a social event. And I like what Gandhi said, poverty is the worst violence because it leads to many other kind of violence. Now I will tell you the story of in 2008 that I have with this incredible group of women. ANFACEP is the Association for the Families of the Disappeared and Killed. In Peru. So, but it's basically 95% of them are women. All of them have experienced violence. The unique thing is that they encompass victims from the both sides. So victims from the Shining Path and victims from the army. I was getting in my first trip to Ayacucho, and I met them. And they were asking me, and I was asking them, what will be something that the community wants for using my own resources to do this research? And I mentioned sexual violence as a priority, and they told me no. So I had to say that no. To say that happens. Definitely, it was horrible. It happens to many of us, but that's not really represent who we are. And talking about more about, remember, this was in 2008. So it was 10 years almost. The one already was peaceful time. So it was a lot. The Truth Commission report was out. They were having so it was a time of reflection and just trying to claim for the victims. And they were telling me that that's what they don't trust, that the government will do enough for all the victims, for all the families of the victims, especially for the families of the victims from the army. And they are certain areas that they want to be there. And looking at that, to say, nobody say how strong we are and how many we are. So that was music for my ears, because that means numbers. And that means also that they were looking at how they were resilient. So we were discussing this concept of resilience, and they say, yeah, that makes total sense for us, more than trauma, because it's so funny when you explain to them what trauma means, that is a foreign concept. It's not a word in Quechua. On trauma. That's what they say, the difficult times. And when you mention, okay, and trauma usually create this kind of sequela of distress. And they were telling me, oh, I think I am a little bit traumadita. I am a little bit traumatized. So it was incredible, that responses and that. So that's what I decided. The questions switched. For a focus on sexual violence and trauma, it was a focus on resilience. So it was surviving what they call the Sasachaco tempo. They don't call it other thing. It's a difficult time. And so the design was a cross-sectional survey, 151 Quechua-speaking women in Ayacucho, in rural and urban areas. I went to 3, they don't call indigenous community because a government for the 70 changed that terminology. Is more campesino communities rather than indigenous community, but that communities remain basically as they were even before colonization, many of them. Some not, but many of them, the ones who are really, very in the highlands of the Andes, they remain. And the research question was to examine how they are associated, resilient, post-traumatic responses, life stress now, because the life of everyone who has disadvantage is stressful now. So how that defined how you are in the moment, and how the previous exposure to violence also define how resilient you can be. And this is to have an example of how different experiences of violence were experienced by all the women who they participate in this part of the study. Basically, everyone was affected by violence. Like more than half were tortured. They were forced to serve either in the military or with Sendero. They witnessed so many deaths. They were having to move. They were having to really relocate. They had to escape. And one thing that was important for me, that was kind of giving me a sense of the people, all the people who were participating, all these women, they were trusting us. They were trusting me, a researcher, and the way that we were doing, because 32% recognized that they were sexually assaulted. In the Truth Commission, only 3% of the women reported that they were sexually assaulted. So it's just the context, the legalistic context of the Truth Commission that probably, and probably it's time, because this was 10 years after. So people had, okay, happens to me. And and that was kind of significant. The main findings that resilience actually was not associated as strong with post-traumatic responses as before. Resilience was only associated what is called avoidance symptoms. So not talking about it, not thinking about it, on all of that in a negative way. So avoidance symptoms diminish resilience, was associated positively with one factor: regular participation in civic associations. And they defined that these civic associations were politically active. They were definitely kind of political engagement. And of course, all the other elements of structural violence, being illiterate, having few years of education and unpaid education, and the direct experience of sexual violence were also some factors that impact, diminish the extent of resilience. What was incredibly interesting for me, it was the resilience on post-traumatic symptoms were both higher, really high, for women who participate in these civic associations. So where they're strongly resilient, but they were suffering a lot. And that was one of the trauma pieces that I wanted to disconfirm, that this not resilient comes after trauma. You were already there, and doesn't mean that you are not suffering. Your suffering can keep it, but doesn't mean that you are less stronger and you are not resilient. So that was pretty important. It's more or less what I kind of comment before. And that's not possible. These parallel pathways of resilient and post-traumatic distress cannot be fully explained by linear association and require multiple methodologies. And because they are difficult spots, as Bordeaux said, it's difficult to explain in different ways. Many limitations in this research, sample size, cross-sectional, using explanations of distress that they were for collective experience of violence. I use also a local idioms of distress was completely, how can I say, comparable findings with the regular post-traumatic responses, use non-Indigenous concepts of resilience and distress. All of that were limitations, but I believe at least the egalitarian kind of way that the research questions were defined and the giving back activity. I do what I ask them, what you want from me? And they say, I am doing that now. They told me, we want people to know about us. So I presented this in so many conferences in my life, in my academic life. I am presenting again to you guys. And this is part of my compromise. What they primarily asked me to have that and keep it. And they were interested in not sexual violence in that moment, but they were interested in sexual violence in the younger generations. And I commit to that too after. But my next step was, so how this happened? How this active participation in civic association is associated with resilience, and what is the meaning for that? I use narrative methods, purposely looking for women who were leaders, women who were having passed all this experience of violence, and they have all this experience of life stress in the present, and definitely that makes the inquiry stronger of that. So were focus groups, individual interviews, and very purposive sampling. It was Quechua women who experienced losses and violence, but they were leaders of these grassroots women-led associations that engage. Many of them, of course, ANFACEP, this association that I mentioned before, another all they were women-led associations, Defense of Human Rights of the Victim. Huamanga is the capital city in Ayacucho. Club de Madres, Mothers Clubs, they are very well organized in all neighborhoods. Settlement Association, because it was a lot of internal migration and all of that. The findings, and that's what this phrase that Marta loved, caminar juntas. So the question was, they define resilience as having courage. That was the definition. So the question get transformed. What gives us courage to move forward? Lo que nos da coraje para seguir adelante. It was walking together, caminar juntas, tener reconocimiento público, have public recognition, that people know who we are and what we are doing. And very interesting, our suffering gives us courage. Nuestro sufrimiento nos da coraje. More important, our memories of resistance keep us strong now, because we were already in peaceful times. But they were strong in the times they were not peaceful, when they can be killed in the street anytime just by protesting. So they were completely there. And now some pictures so you can represent the stories. And this is walking together. They still go, the association and many other, because you see these different banners in the back. So it's not just ANFACEP, but it's many. They keep protesting, they keep fighting for recognition of the victim. They keep fighting for causes for the campesinos and the indigenous communities. They keep for gender issues, for sexual violence. They keep really very active on that. Many of the founders already passed away. You can imagine they were 30s in the 80s. So they, unfortunately, many of them, they are not anymore. And this is one that has been, before she passed away, when she was 85, she was given the highest honor for human rights in the nation. Finally, after 45 years, La Señora Angelica Mendoza, and I have the privilege to have met her and her family. She lost 3 kids, 3 sons, two sons and 1 daughter in the conflict. But it was the loss of the youngest one, who was living still with her at 18, 19 years old kid, that made her being so active. That was in 83. And that's what she decided to, they were in, you remember that place with the mass graves? Well, Mama Angelica and other ladies, they were meeting there every night, trying to see the identified corpses of the lost ones. And they decided to start doing things together, to go into the fortress together, to claim for the victims, to do all this stuff together. And they continue to doing that, and they create this association, the National Association of the Families of the Disappeared, Kidnapped, and Killed. Another beautiful woman, La señora Lydia Cáceres. Our memories keep us strong today. She lost her partner. She was very young. She was younger than probably Mama Angelica. And one of her daughters is a social worker now. And but she was feeling herself, like a 20 years old with two little kids, two elderly parents, and fighting. So she also become part of the movement. But she say, in that time everything was so difficult. Now it's very easy to open a human rights association. In that time, you can be in jail in that moment, or you can be killed in that moment. And they were having so much courage that they were still, the mayor of Huamanga was killed. It was a really amazing woman lawyer, because she was supporting them. Nobody knew who killed her, but she was killed just for that sake. And having public recognition again is that they go to the news, they ask people like me. Many people have been interested on them, and that they want to be part of that, because they want the people know how was that difficult, that fight. They were not only caring for themselves, but they were caring for their communities. They were caring for orphan children that they were funding around. So they kind of doing a very much collective of support and resilience, and really advocating for everything. So one of the conclusions after these two experience of research and so much examples of courage and resilience, is that we have to be really cautionary of how do we use the global mental health knowledge in the context of collective violence, of suffering, of resilience. And having many people lately that really advocate for that, and I am really happy to see that, because they make no sense. And some honest researchers have been really honest and recognized that, and some other people continue to use very kind of by the book PTSD frameworks and things like that they don't really realize that. The other thing is how memory is important for resilience, and how and that is acting as a bridging practice that is a local implicit knowledge that, as my colleague in research, Pilar Riaño Alcalá, she's Colombian, she say appears to, she put that term, implicit knowledge. That's the memory that we have of, and that appears to guide the resilience pathways of Quechua women, because they say our memories get stronger, our suffering make us stronger, all of that. And it's a challenge to the colonized global health, to the colonized research. I am happy to see more in the global health sphere rather than in other spheres. It's very interesting, because you believe that social science can be further, like a more progressive. But I don't see that in many cases. I see more in the global health. Richard Horton is an amazing physician and advocate for really consider, okay, all these local knowledge traditions worked well before colonial times. So they should inform the local interventions now, because that is actually more powerful than anything that is trying to be impressed at. And we see that in climate change, in mental health, in physical health, in different areas. So this is kind of the conclusions of that. Any questions so far? I will go really quick to the rest. And so from this experience of understanding violence, understanding resilience, and what makes resilience so incredible, linked to courage, as they define it, and even linked to suffering, and that I continue with looking at experience of everyday violence and resilience, and populations that they how they understand that. And I finished kind of looking at one particular group that has a lot of marginalization. So it was and following what still this incredible woman telling me to do. They told me to focus on youth and on the young people because they found that there's so many problems that the youth have experienced, and they said, we don't have the same energy. We have to identify how to help. So one of the projects that I did was HIV prevention, everyday violence and resilience, and the perceptions of youth in Peru. It was in Lima and Ayacucho. So it was very interesting to work in both cities and look at that. So basically, what the findings quickly go is that LGBT youth every youth is experienced to all type of violence, but every LGBT youth is everything is an excuse for violence. That's what they say. Everything is excuse for violence against that, and structural and direct violence, and all of that. And this was so much important again, that working together, the support and acceptance from families, immediate social networks was critical for the resilience of all youth, not only LGBT youth, but all youth in general. And I want to put some quick picture. This is my colleagues, co-researchers. Marta, you identify this guy here. He's Frank Arocha from the University of Waterloo Public Health, and the husband of was our common friends from Marta, Zaira Leon, a lovely friend who works in the faculty in Laurier. And this is my sister in crime and in everything, Carmen Logi. We did the PhD together. She's faculty at the University of Toronto. Three of us, we did this research. It was so nice to have company of other people. In Ayacucho, they love Ayacucho. People love them. Frank speaks perfect Spanish, and Carmen is so gifted that in a couple of days, I believe she was quite fluent. She's a fast learner, and she's part of the community, the LGBTQ community. So people were celebrating that the person is coming, that understand that struggle. And we were in Epicentro here. Epicentro is an amazing community gay center in Lima that is incredible, all what they do. And so we were celebrating, and this is just kind of view of how were our focus group. It was including community organizer, trans organizers, sex workers organizers, members of different parts of the LGBTQ spectrum, heterosexual youth. It was a really great effort to have inclusion. In Ayacucho, they told me that I create history because it was the first time that were people from academia, people from the Ministry of Health, people from the gay community, and just regular people from the community. Like they never mix in one point. And the incredible discussions were so unbelievable, so respectful, and so alive. Were very interesting of seeing all of this, and it was a really a great. Another focus that I did was preventing violence and developing I am going just quickie of that. That was my last project that still I consider ongoing because the community keep moving. We developed a prevention model of sexual violence. This is with a group of people in Ayacucho. Andrea was my RA. She's from Global Studies in Wilfrid Laurier. You remember our friend Marta, Alex Lata. I went desperate to Alex. I said, Alex, I need a research assistant speak Spanish. And she said, I have the best. She's amazing. And not only speak Spanish, but she actually is Peruvian. So I say, oh, so Andrea traveled with me. She was 19. She was a kid and the most amazing research assistant. She did her mastering in now in U of T, and now she works in the city of Toronto in the areas of immigration and youth violence and different things there. She's an amazing, she was amazing to have her. We developed with the community, was a lot of community partners, this model of prevention. There was a training, El que ve y ayuda, who sees and help. So was that, it was a quantitative evaluation of that, and the intention to intervene and the empathy for victims, all was really demonstrating that the program was creating that. We did a qualitative portion, and that this is kind of our picture. That is in 1 year. We were training already 700 people, so only 150 something took part of the evaluation. But and I believe right now it's like we are close to the 5,000 at least. The pandemic was a hit, but this is what finished the whole thing. This Rikusca Yanapakut is the name in Quechua. And the taxi drivers and the bus driver, they asked me for something, how to remember people to intervene in sexual violence. And you remember we have in our website one of the videos of this training. Yeah, that is coming from here. And just the final project that is about memory, that I am going to go quick. Definitely it is how to make memory transformative, memory after violence, and imply different kind of embodied methodologies. I am pretty humble in how I am learning for that. All of that, and that is very interesting. My colleague she's an Indigenous scholar, Amy Craft from the University of Ottawa. She's a water-based researcher. How can be that more incredible? And a lawyer. And she said that this is research is experiential and situated because embeds is change and knowledge production in social, land, and waterways way of knowing. So we are people from everywhere, but we did an exchange in Uganda and Colombia, and then will be one in Peru, hopefully in 4 years, because they got another grant. This is a kind of looking how arts are immersed. This is called the Relicarios. Relicarios is families of the missing in the war in Colombia. They give to this artist, Erika Dieres, that is an amazing artist, the most important pieces that they remember of and she's collecting that. So she has a display of that. It's like a museum, but it is so impressive and really break your heart. Like I couldn't walk when I look at this, for example. Like you see how, what they have from that person. It was one box that was just a toothbrush, just a simple toothbrush, because all what this mother was having from that son, the toothbrush that he left there. It was incredible. They are not yet figuring out the Truth Commission in Colombia. It's pretty complex. Violence is still continue. And that's one of the reasons. But if we have 70,000 people who were killed or disappeared, they have close to 1 million. So it's way more higher situation. And here is kind of, we were looking at that. And you see our faces. I put this in because we were dismayed. When we're looking at this, this is all the people who were in this research trip. Brandon is from Irlanda, he's Colombian, she's Colombian, he's Colombian. I am here, Peruvian, but we have to sit and take a time to really digest and to really feel the powerful situation that we were there. Another powerful situation was this non-monument memory, and this after the war, as a lot of arms and equipments were what is happening here? Oh, okay. After they were a lot of weapons from the army and from the FARC, the guerrilla, that they were definitely, they were meltdown. And with this metal, an artist invited a group of women who were sexually assaulted just to really do something with this metal. And they created this floor this metal floor. So the monument is just a place that is covered with this metal from weapons that they have been really they have been melted, and they have been, the woman has discharged all the energy in just really they create something that makes a memory of that. I don't know what is happening here. Very weird. Do you see all this space? It's just that. No, it's nothing more. This is myself that I was overwhelmed again for that, but that is giving me because they were more women participating in that than women who reported the sexual violence. It's another project that I have right now and it's a chapter that I am writing for this transformative memory that is about silence memories and war-related sexual violence. It has been one of the most intense writing that I have done in my life, because it was a lot of reflection done of that, and hopefully it's coming soon. It will be available everywhere because it's really part of the ebook, part of that. And that's it. Funding acknowledgement, share, CIHR, IDRC, U of T, Laurier, they have been pretty generous with me along all this way. And this is just a sample of research, not all research. And yeah, the final, oh my God, what happened with me and my fingers? Okay, gracias, thank you. Upsalai, Uspalai. And it's a lot of reference that hopefully, especially for Debian or Touchbase, can be useful there at the end. And I can give you separate the PowerPoint in PDF, but thank you so much for listening.